I didn't catch your name.
I didn't give it.
Before he became the iconic British spy that the world fell in love with, James Bond was just another MI6 recruit, trying to prove himself and, well, not blow things up. And this journey is exactly what 007 First Light explores. The game comes from IO Interactive, the studio behind Hitman, and you can instantly feel that DNA within the very first few minutes of the game. So, what exactly makes 007 First Light special? And should you actually buy it? Well, after spending way too many hours in the game, here's what I think. The very first thing that came to my mind the moment the opening cutscene started playing was, this looks like a movie. And I'm not exaggerating here. There are moments in this game where it feels like the developers forgot that they were making a game and accidentally ended up making a spy thriller film. The lighting, the facial animations, the camera angles during cutscenes, everything just screams pure cinema. The visuals are undoubtedly one of the biggest strengths of the game. The environment is packed with detail, textures look incredibly sharp, water reflection looks insanely realistic, and lighting and reflections add on so much depth to every location. Like, seriously, look at this mirror. The reflection looks like an actual mirror. So, in a nutshell, the world feels alive, polished, and expensive in the best possible way. Now, let's quickly talk about performance because I know that many of you would want those details. I played 007 First Light on my PC, powered by an NVIDIA RTX 5060 Ti GPU, paired with an AMD Ryzen 7 9800 XTD processor, which means that the game looked absolutely stunning and ran with zero issues. At 2K resolution with graphics settings set to Ultra, I was getting around 45 FPS. Now, a stable 45 FPS is certainly playable, but won't result in that ultra smooth experience. And that is where NVIDIA DLSS steps in. When I turned on the NVIDIA DLSS and set frame gen to 2x, I instantly started getting around 76 FPS, and the gameplay became a whole lot smoother. Pushing the frame gen to 4x gave me 136 FPS, and when I turned the frame gen all the way up to 6S, the game was easily touching 200 FPS, while still maintaining some impressive visual quality. And with DLSS Super Resolution set to performance, things got even crazier. I started getting around 230 FPS, which is just amazing. But personally, my sweet spot was the NVIDIA DLSS set to quality with 2x frame gen enabled. The game looked absolutely gorgeous in this case and stayed at around a stable 80 FPS, which is just more than enough. Now, spy games are nothing new. We've had stealth games, espionage games, military thrillers, and all of that before. But when you take one of the most iconic fictional characters ever created and show a version of him that hasn't really been explored before, that automatically becomes interesting. And that's exactly what 007 First Light does with James Bond. This version of Bond is young, reckless, and still learning how the world of espionage works. He clearly has talent, but he also has problems with authority, acts impulsively, and often gets emotional. And this is exactly what makes the game way too much fun. Now, he is still Bond, which means style, sarcasm, charm, and being super smooth around women. At times, 007 First Light's Bond actually reminded me of Leon in Resident Evil 2 or Nathan Drake in the very first Uncharted game. There is that same energy when you know the character is special, but hasn't fully become a legend yet. There is also some emotional vulnerability here. Without spoiling too much, there's a moment in the game where Bond kills some people in order to save some innocent ones. And instead of acting cool about it, he actually looks shaken, maybe even scared. And that human side adds a lot to the character. In fact, one of the most Bond moments in the opening hours is where he completely ignores orders and risks his own life trying to save people, despite the survival odds being just 1%. It is reckless, it is stupid, and it is absolutely James Bond. Now, a lot of story driven games end up making supporting characters feel forgettable, but thankfully, that's not the case here. While Bond himself is obviously the star of the show, the supporting cast also gets a lot of attention. The other MI6 trainees and agents all have personalities of their own. They joke around, argue, challenge Bond, and are quite memorable. The game world itself is also full of personality. There is style everywhere, period. You get some fancy locations, beautiful interiors, stylish outfits, and a blend of luxury, chaos, and mystery. For instance, one of the early missions takes place inside a nightclub. And I don't want to spoil it for you because the entire sequence is just too fun to experience. But that mission alone perfectly captures what the entire game world is trying to be, which is stylish, tense, fun, and slightly, no, a lot intense. Now, let's talk about the story, gameplay, and combat. Again, I won't spoil the story much because this is very much a game that you should experience yourself, but I will say this: the pacing and plot here are just excellent. This is Bond's origin story, and just like Bond himself, the story moves fast, sometimes way too fast. You're quickly thrown into dangerous situations, missions escalate rapidly, and the story constantly keeps moving forward. And I personally love that. The dialogue writing here is also just super. There is sarcasm, humor, tension, flirting, and some stylish one liners.
Bond? Monroe? Status?
Monroe just crashed the party.
I actually found myself smiling and laughing a lot while playing this game. Coming to combat, it is exactly what you would expect from a James Bond game. It's elegant but also very dangerous. This is not a superhero Bond who can just casually destroy entire armies without effort. Bond here is still inexperienced, and the combat actually reflects that. Fights can get messy, enemies can overwhelm you, mistakes are punished, and I really appreciate that realism. That said, the gameplay can initially feel slightly overwhelming, and I wish that the game had spent a little more time easing players into everything. There are gadgets, movement mechanics, stealth systems, and combat options that take some time getting used to. So, the learning curve during the first few hours can feel a bit intense. In fact, there were actually moments where I considered lowering the difficulty after failing some missions repeatedly. But my ego refused. And finally, we need to talk about the music and the sound design because this game sounds incredible. The opening credits sequence alone is unbelievably stylish. I usually skip opening credits because I'm just that impatient, but here I sat through the whole thing. The music, visuals, and presentation feel like a proper Bond movie intro sequence. Even the smaller sound details are just fantastic. In all, the game really makes you feel like you're part of MI6, and that is probably the biggest compliment that I can give it. So, should you buy 007 First Light? Short answer, yes. Long answer, if you enjoy cinematic story driven games, stealth gameplay, spy thrillers, or just James Bond as a character, this one's for you. Yes, there is a learning curve, but that is just part of the fun. More importantly, 007 doesn't feel like a lazy licensed game trying to cash in on a famous name. It's a carefully crafted reimagining of Bond's early years. And after spending over 10 hours with it, I can't wait to see where the story takes me next. So, what do you think about the game, and do you plan on getting it yourself? Do let us know in the comments. And keep following Digit for more such content.
I suppose this is another teachable moment.